ready? I want to make sure it's recording before we go.
We are live.
Okay. All right, I have 5:47. I will call the meeting to order. Let's and pledge. Flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Recorder, if you would call the roll.
Chairperson Harrison.
Here.
Vice Chair Jeremy Burnett.
Here.
Acton.
Present.
Deborah Thomas. Michelle Childs. Here. Superintendent Horrell.
Here.
We do have a quorum, however, this is a work session, so we will take a more relaxed approach to this agenda. Now we actually have the opportunity for public comment. Would anyone from the public like to speak? Hearing none, next item. Mr.
Next item is our report section, starting with the legislative representative update.
Ms. Childs.
The General Assembly is no longer in session, so I do not have an update.
Thank you, Ms. Childs.
One note, I saw a comment that for the special called special legislative session coming up, there actually is an open spot for people to put in comments and suggestions. Of all places, I got enlightened on social media that that's out there.
I did see that. If a special session does end up being officially called, then I will report back on what is occurring and happening and does happen there.
Very much. Next item.
Next item is the superintendent's report. I do have a few things I'll share with you at this work session. If you're not aware, school's out, so we're glad to wrap up another, I think, really successful year with a lot of exciting things going on, in particular adding our first high school grades and the many, many successes that we saw in academics and athletics and in fine arts for that first year. One thing that is started today, and I want to recognize Principal Corey Martin, who just walked in, and she's got some summer camp happening on her campus. She's got 41 students enrolled in summer camp to get some extended learning at Lakeland Preparatory School, and they have 100 enrolled in their extended learning summer camp at LES. So great to see those kids, and I stood out there and waved to them when they were coming in at LES this morning. And they really do. They do look just as excited and happy, for real, genuinely, as the first day of school, and just dressed and ready to go. So we're excited to give them those opportunities, and a great group of teachers that feel good about that work and feel like it makes a difference. And there was just a lot of excitement this morning around those summer camps. In addition to those camps, I can tell you at LES, kindergarten camp is happening this week. Camp Invention and Drama Camp have happened already, so there's just always a number of things that are going on. You can see them out using the athletic fields every day and using the weight rooms, and the band has been out practicing for their show, and so it's just as busy as it ever is. The only difference is they're just not ringing the bells and sending them to class, but lots of everything else just seems to be happening. Speaking of academics, as has been publicized, we got back, because of the third grade retention law, we got back our third grade proficiency. Those are the only scores that have been where the embargo has been lifted on any information, and we're very pleased to report that Lakeland's proficiency went up 11% from the previous year, up to 69.3% proficient and advanced. And as she tends to say, Jaretha Lockhart said, "That's great, but until it's number one, it's not good enough." But it's really, really good, and we're very pleased with the improvement there, and looking forward to seeing. We should get the complete proficiency scores, although they'll still be embargoed on June 12th. So about a week from today, we'll get the complete proficiency scores I think for everybody statewide next week. Wanted to mention that. Our great partners, Chris Woods Construction, are finalizing a final, just a flurry of punch list items. They've been very busy over the past week and over the weekend, and will be this week, and knocking out some things that are difficult to get done while school is in session, and nearing the end of that contractual agreement besides any warranty items that are still there. So just want to acknowledge again what great partners they have been in the construction of both Lakeland Middle Preparatory School and Lakeland Preparatory High School. Lots of other things going on in the background. I'll touch on just a few of them. We are working on a new and improved website for Lakeland School System and both schools, and it's, I think you're really going to be pleased with that once you see it. And you may have seen some parts of it already, I think, doing some reviews, but that's going to be great. I know Ms. Millspaw and her team have been working very hard on a new employee onboarding system and spending more time than she'd probably like to acknowledge, working through that. A lot of summer maintenance work happening in the buildings, on the floors, on the grounds, and in the buildings themselves. That's all happening, so lots of things. Again, it's just a beehive. And then a number of trainings already are taking place in a number of areas, including counseling and mental health, our RTI 2B, which is our behavioral expectations programs, kind of doing a reset on that. There are a number of things that, particularly when students were out of school during the pandemic, I think got, maybe dropped off in terms of the fidelity with which it was happening. So we're doing a reset there. I've been working with Ms. Martin and her team on some updated discipline guidelines for Lakeland Preparatory School, and having a number of successful meetings there. So again, I think I've noted sometimes people say, what do you do all summer when you work in schools? And there's plenty to do, as we can all say. Sometimes we're eager for the kids to get back so we can get back to normal. But anyway, it's a great summer, and really excited about the things that are going on. So that concludes my report. I'll certainly take any questions if there are any.
Michelle?
I remember at some point you saying that the crest had to be put in, and I think it was going to be during spring break, and I just forgot to ask about that.
It did not make spring break. It has actually been installed. We're going to do a test. The only reason I haven't sent a picture, this is full transparency, is the area within the circle that was not replaced has already been waxed, and the color is a little different, so it kind of stands out where the new tiles are. So Chris Wood's Construction is going to strip the inside of the circle, and we're going to re-wax it and make sure it all looks good. I can tell you the crest looks great. The crest itself looks terrific and just really brings the room together for that entryway. So I think you'll all be pleased. I've taken a picture a couple of times and thought, I'm going to send this to the board, but with the, how I am with colors sometimes, it's just not, it's not quite there, and so I haven't been able to bring myself to send it to you yet. But if you want to come see it, you can. But yes, that is happening. And actually what we did, there was a crest that was erroneously produced, and it was too small, and the colors were a little off for the application that we had. We moved that to the back Fine Arts Hall, so when students walk into the corridor that has the band, orchestra, and choir rooms, there's a nice kind of miniature little crest that's a little different. So we were able to put it to good use.
I do have one. So I know you said that you expect June 12th for the TCAP scores to come in, but of course they'll be embargoed at that point. Do you have any, or has there been any indication from the state when parents will be able to access their students?
Let me check on that. I believe that's part of the timetable that's been released. I think the individual TCAP scores, they're not under. I'm not going to speak on that. Let me look that up and make sure.
Just next
Yeah,
week,
yeah,
if
you
you
got
could just
it, you got
update. And I think that's the only question I had noted. Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Any more questions about? All right, next item.
Next item is the April financial summary, which is presented for you. It is available, the May financial summary, because this is a work session so close to the end of May. It's not there, as you know from doing work sessions before. But if there are any questions on the April financial summary, you can certainly ask those if you'd like.
Item.
Next item, we move to, the approval of the agenda, and the consent agenda are not, I guess, germane for a work session, so we can move on down to the discussion items at the board's will. First, we have the approval of the minutes from the business meeting on May 8th, 2023.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, any objection to placing this on the consent agenda? Hearing none, we place this item on the consent agenda for the next meeting. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on update to policy 4.301, interscholastic athletics.
Or you wanna, I
Sure.
can speak to it, or you can, either one.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Harrison.
So actually, I had been doing some, just comparing to other school districts and looking at their different policies and just doing some policy review of my own. And one thing I came across was some other districts had this actual coach's code of conduct, which is, I believe it is in the Tennessee law. It's in the public acts according to the reference. So it actually is part of it, but they actually listed it out. And so I thought I was bringing the amendment, or bringing this revised policy to the board to actually solidify it or put it out there, that it was something that I felt strongly that would be good for us to put in our interscholastic athletics policy. Ma'am.
Yeah, I really like the idea of it. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. I would like to also add, if it's to the will of the board, a line about conflicts of interest. And what I had, which is open to editing, is seek to avoid conflicts of interest and potential conflicts of interest, and openly disclose any such conflicts. I will immediately inform Lakeland schools if such a conflict arises.
Discussion? That?
I like the idea. I would say we have something similar where I work, where there's a disclosure, even if there's the appearance, or could be the appearance, so that someone higher up, we actually have a team that reviews it and says, thanks for the disclosure. There is no, I mean, I have to fill out one every year for serving on this board.
And just to give context, I know that I know with some sports that you may have, I know this has happened with other schools, that you may have a coach who also coaches competitively, but then the coach can't coach any students that may be his or her students who would be on the same sport at, Lakeland schools. So just things like that. And I'm sure there's many other conflicts that we could come up with, but just that, if they were accepting extra, if they're a full-time employee accepting extra, or contracted, and they knew there was a potential conflict, that they would disclose it at the front end, and that, or if it comes up later, they would notify the correct personnel, so that, it wouldn't just be something where caught unawares and potentially an athlete can't play. And I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure there's many other potential conflicts. There might be fine art teachers that do private lessons, and that could be something as well. Maybe it's not. So there's a number of things that could come up, or to Mr. Burnett's point, it could be also a perceived conflict of interest as well. I know as school board, we have that as well, that we have to disclose any potential conflicts of interest. And I know not all school boards have that, but we follow the TSBA one on that. So I just think it's good practice for any type organization.
If I may, how would that work with or against our conflict of interest policy that we have in place? I probably should just refer to it and or ask my question. I just thinking out loud here. Dr. Roy, putting you on the spot. I don't know if you have.
I would want to go back and review
Yeah,
it.
need to
I
compare it.
feel like some of the examples that Ms. Childs was working to address are specific. They're less financial. I feel like the conflict
Yes.
of interest refers mainly to financial things. I know Ms. Childs mentioned that, but I think we're also talking about if you're coaching in different contexts in a way that might lead you to question priority or the allegiance, I guess, as to which team. I feel like that would be the difference, and it might be a matter of writing in a way that makes that clear that we're talking about within the coaching context. So I feel like in this case that it would be under our situation probably a good addition to the code of conduct, and it's separate and apart from the conflicts of interest policy, which is a good point because we're using the same phrase.
More discussion on this item?
One more question on 3, row 13. It's item number 15. Display modesty in victory and graciousness in defeat. Just for a point of clarity, I mean, win a game, we win a regional, a sectional, a state championship. I wouldn't want us to hold a coach accountable for having a momentary hallelujah, jump up and down, scream for joy. That's not very modest, but I would certainly not have a problem with a board member with a coach celebrating victory.
I don't personally read it that way in terms of modesty in an athletics context. I think celebrating and even wildly celebrating, you know, accomplishments that get greater and greater, I think are still within modesty. To me, something that would be immodest would be saying, we killed that team and they shouldn't have even been playing against us, and you know they had no business being on our field. That's where I might have a conversation, say, hey, that's not the kind of, you know, talk that we want to have. But I think as far as somebody celebrating, to me, I think you can celebrate exuberantly and still be modest. That would be my take on it. But
All right.
it does leave some openness to interpretation, I guess.
Yeah, I would just want to make sure we had some level setting around defining modesty there. Not the context I thought I would say defining modesty in, but certainly it's
So
appropriate.
certainly, something like that could be further elaborated on, let's say, in the coach's handbook or the athletics handbook,
Agreed.
where, you know, just basically given, I mean, even just a frequently asked questions are an example that could go into some kind of detail like that to just make sure everybody understands you can celebrate your wins. Nobody's trying to say don't celebrate your wins, just don't be ugly to other people.
Right,
When you're doing it.
A lot of this is just, we're having to put common sense into writing, but it's good stuff, and I'm fine with this. This is good.
So, with Ms. Child's addition, do we want to place this on the consent agenda, or does everybody want it to be on the regular agenda?
I can get comfortable only, I just like to see the verbiage first before
Why don't we bring it back on the regular and that way
that way we can all be in the same page.
take a look
with
at
it.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good with what she's recommending. I just like to see.
This item will go on our regular agenda.
I get that from Ms. Childs. Yep. All right. Next item is discussion action on the update to policy 4.600 grading system.
I give a summary of the,
I would like to give a summary. We've certainly spent enough time working through this, and I want to thank Ms. Martin and Ms. Decker in particular that have led a lot of that work, but I've also had a tremendous amount of board input on this, and I'll also note this may not be the end of it yet. These are kind of some big decisions, and a lot of it has to do with, again, this first year of having the high school, and much of it also has to do with the traditional lack of reliability on standardized tests, period. I should say historical, not traditional, but the historical that we've seen. And then also just taking a realistic look at moving forward when we expect to get standardized test results. There are several ways, and what a lot of this focuses on is how are grades calculated with respect to semester exams, but also state mandated assessments. So to me, those are the two biggest things that are contemplated by this change in policy. And some of these questions are philosophical in terms of what is the school system's philosophy of assessment and of grading. And there are several at least different ways that these grades and these tests in particular are handled. And some of our peer school systems say that if there's a if there's a state exam, then they don't give a semester exam. We have some, like Germantown Municipal School District, that says you'll take the state exam and you'll take the semester exam both. They have different requirements over who can be exempt from exams in terms of 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So those are kind of some of the things that we're wrestling with, as well as how are these grades how grades actually calculated based on state law, because state law comes into play here in terms of when when state standardized exam grades must be calculated and what that calculation should be. So I wonder why there was so much confusion over this. There's a lot at play. What is being recommended essentially by the administration, I believe with the support of the teachers at Lakeland Preparatory School, is a system in which all students in grades, in the middle school grades through 11th grade take semester exams. I'm sorry, all students. Let's go 6 through 11, right? Sorry. Thank you. Middle school students only, so 8th graders taking high school courses. Middle school students, thank you. Ms. Martin said it right the first time. Middle school students that are taking high school courses through 11th grade, these are the ones that are going to take they will all take a first semester exam. Okay? And then they would also have the opportunity to be exempt from the second semester exam. Seniors could be exempt from both semester exams. Okay, so that is what the proposal is in terms of semester exams in those courses. And when they get into high school, it would be every course, not just the ones that obviously have TCAP or end of course tests. The proposal in this grading system is that if there is a second semester, presumably end of course test that the students must take, that they would take both. That they would take the state test and then they would also take the semester exam, assuming they were not a senior and were exempt. Or assuming they were not exempt, period. I'm making it even worse. Did I make it right? Okay. All right. So that's kind of the discussion. Now, at play here also, and this we had a conversation with the chair, at play here also is that we currently, in a different policy, say that standardized tests will count the minimum permitted by state law. Okay, so the state law says that in middle school grades, standardized tests count 10% of the final second semester grade, and for high school students, 15% of the final second semester grade. Ms. Martin is smiling and nodding. That makes me feel good that I've learned something here. But it also says, state law says, if you don't get those scores back 5 days prior to the last day of school, then you may not count them. You can choose to not count them. Because Lakeland School System policy says we're going to count at the minimum, even we can, if we don't get them back those 5 days before, we don't. There are other school systems that even if they get them late, if they get them the day before or even the last day of school, they still count them. So I just want that context to play, because the reason we don't count them is because of prior, essentially decisions made by the Board of Education prior to us having a high school as well. So I think I've adequately summarized the changes that are in here in terms of exams, exam exemption, and the proposal that there would be situations where if they were not exempt, students would take both a state standardized test and a semester exam. And that is what we are presenting to you at this work session.
Everybody ready?
Let's go.
I have some opinions and I've expressed them to Dr. Horrell, so I'll let anybody that wants some discussion or I can lead us off, whichever one y'all choose.
I have one probably not related to those that I just wanted to suggest really quickly. And it's on page 5 under advanced coursework. It says students enrolled in AP courses, state dual credit, local dual credit, or national industry certifications are expected to sit. Line 9, students who fail to sit for the culminating exam will not be awarded the quality points or weighting points attributed to the course. Would it also be worthy to reinforce the idea, nor will they be eligible to receive either the industry certification or the higher education credit? If you don't take the state or local dual credit exam or the AP or CLEP exam, there's no way to get the college credit. You don't explicitly say that in there.
Well, if I were going to argue against saying it, I'd say that that's not a decision that we make. Like it's if you don't sit, yeah, you don't get the credit, and it doesn't matter if we said you did or you didn't. wouldn't. We do have the discretion to say whether or not you get the quality points if you don't take the exam. It would, I don't think it would hurt to add it if you felt like it would clarify.
Either here or maybe in items that we send to parents so that they see that as well, just to eliminate any confusion. I'd hate for a parent to say, oh, I sat in this dual credit or dual enrollment class all semester. Well, dual enrollment wouldn't be the same, but just dual credit or AP or CLEP class. And then I did well in the entire class. I got an A. Where's my college credit? Maybe it's not in policy and it's just something we make sure that parents see.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have others, but they're probably related to yours.
So I'll just kick it off, and I'm a math person, so I started doing the calculations of what percentage to test, if the state standardized test came back, meaning the EOC came back, and there was second semester, there was this 80%, trying to do the calculations basically if you had both tests or whatever. So essentially, if all of it came true and all of it, we got the test in time, essentially, the two tests would count 32% of the student's second semester grade, two tests. I have big concerns about that because there are some children that are not good test takers. They may have a bad day, 2 bad days, whatever. So 32% seems like a huge, they've done all work for 18 weeks, 2 9 weeks, and then 32% of their grade is based on 2 tests on 2 days. No telling what's going on in their personal life or at school, whatever. So I'm more inclined, and I had this conversation with Dr. Horrell too. I also, at the same time, in high school courses especially, I feel like, I know when we had those discussions about TCAP and T and ready counting and everything else, that was, when we've had those discussions over the past several years, that was when we had the online testing debacle. We don't know when the tests are gonna be, how they're gonna be. They weren't, it's just been a mess with the tests for several years. And from what I have seen, at least the past 2 years, the test seems to be smoothed out and doesn't seem to have that same stigma with it where it's not going smoothly and there could be things impacting students and teachers. And I think everybody remembers at the time it wasn't just students we were saying we didn't feel like that this debacle should count towards. We also said at the same time teachers, this shouldn't count against teachers too, because this is not their fault as well that we had all these testing debacles. So I want to make sure that, just to go back to where we were. So now I personally, and what's funny is I have 2 kids in 2 different school systems. So I was thinking, oh, my one child in Lakeland school system, their EOCs were gonna be, where's their EOCs when I was looking on, and then, our policy is we didn't get it in 5 days, whereas I have a child in another school system where they did get and they were constantly waiting. That child knew their EOC was gonna count and was asking because they wanted to know what their final grade was for the semester. So I personally, with the smoothing out of the testing or whatever you want to call it, would be in favor of applying the EOCs and applying the TN readies to the students' grades if they were, received last day of school. So that may be an additional item for consideration when doing this or when looking at this policy. I am not in favor of 32% of a student's second semester grade, which is the worst case, or I don't know what could be best case, but worst case, best case scenario, being based on 2 tests. So, anyways, so that's my major. I do appreciate how I do think the students need to take the first semester exams. I think that's an important practice. They will take it in college. I have a student in college right now, and she has semester exams every semester. And the flip side of that, I don't think she has any course that I've seen, at least when I've seen her, because I look at all of her stuff, I don't think she has a single course where 32% of her grade is based on 2 tests. So I think that's a bit excessive, and I think we need to look at, yes, they need to have some culminative tests to be able to count towards their grade, but 32% seems like a lot.
And can I note one thing that was part of our conversation, and one of the reasons I wanted to give the context for the state board policy that says they're not going to count if we don't get them that early. It's almost like intentionally excluding them. And what we were winding up with is a lot of situations where, you're exempt from the exam, and then the TCAP doesn't count, and then there's no test that counts towards your grade. So I do think, and we spoke about this, I would be interested in not one without the other. In other words, if where you're going is we were just going to count the EOC, I would want to make sure that we're going to count the EOC and change the policy where the EOC counts as long as we get it
Right.
by the last day of school or something
Right.
more inclusive rather than exclusive, because I think the part of the teachers and the administration's desire is to make sure there's accountability for the testing itself. Sure, so in other words, if we left that 5-day window the way it is and said, if you've got an EOC, then we're not gonna have a semester exam, then gratuity almost, that you never get it back.
And I did express that I was in support of having the EOC count in our conversation, that I do support the EOC counting towards the students, even if it's not received in the 5
Like
days.
you said, in high school.
Yes, in the
yeah.
high school, because that's
Or
where
in
the
high school
EOC 's
courses.
yeah.
Or EOC, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where so I would, in favor, in place of, or whatever you want to call it, semester exams. Just those EOC courses, one or the other, I guess is the best way to say it, is what I would certainly be in favor of.
I think the idea, I mean, I support the idea of having first semester exams. I mean, my daughter's in a different district and she's never taken an exam, and she's a rising senior. Now she's taking AP because that was, one that you can choose to do that. But I guess I have a little bit of concern with taking 2 end-of-year tests on the ones that have an EOC, and then you have a second semester exam. However, I know one of the comments that you made to me when we talked about it was that if you don't have the potential for a semester exam, which I guess most of the EOCs would not be seniors, but if you don't have a semester exam, then the last big test you have is your end of course exam is in April. So you mentioned that part of the reason you're supporting having a semester exam is the dead period where you're like, it's the end of your exam. So, I took that into account. So I guess with asking the question, if on the particular classes, which are not the majority of high school classes, but on the particular high school classes where you have an EOC and then you have a second semester exam for the juniors and below, or possible seniors who aren't exempt. Would it be possible that there could be a cap on, what's the highest percentage that an exam could count? So, for example, so then if we never got the EOC back in time, whether we said 5 or whether we said last day, however that works out, but we say, here's your cap, and, on what's the most and combine them or something like that.
Yeah, it's a great point, and something I
So it's
was
not
thinking.
32%.
The state requirement for what CAP and EOC counts is in the law, so we don't have any play there.
Right.
You as a board, have complete discretion over what the exam counts. The 20% it's not state law. It could be 5%. It could be 10%.
Okay,
It could be
so-
5% if there's an end of course test, and 20% if there's not. It could
So
be any
your
number.
recommendation on high school exams, that they count 20% on the teacher-made high school?
What's in the
okay.
current proposal?
So, would it be possible that we could say for, the ones that have the EOC and second semester, it would have a combined cap of 20%, and whatever's the minimum that the state is for the EOC, and then ours would factor together? And I know you gotta figure the math,
Absolutely
because you
could.
were telling me like, it's.
Ms. Martin's laughing about skyward calculations, but
I had a spreadsheet. That's the only reason I was able to do the math. That spreadsheet made it possible.
Yeah, because it wasn't, when you explained to me, it's like, oh, well, it goes into with the grade, and then the other comes out at a separate, so it's not quite straightforward, which is why we're all laughing on the math, but, So I guess I'd just like to put that up for discussion, if we are gonna have to, that for certain classes that we consider capping how much 2 big test scores would count as a final exam versus the grade they've earned. Because I do recognize the dead period piece that you spoke of and what you're trying to.
I think it's a reasonable compromise, for sure.
Where's the flow chart? You know, I'm, in reading this, make sure that, and I'm trying to be very correct in how I say this, I don't want to put too much dependency on the state test. So I'm looking for the solution that's going to help overcome a bad day on a state test. And that's my, looking at this, I guess I would like to also understand, what do the other school systems do? It's just so I some understanding. It sounds like there's two different variables there as far as
I
how they
think,
operate.
I can say this comfortably, I don't want anybody to take it as gospel, because I certainly don't want to speak for or misrepresent another school system. My understanding is that,
You don't have to list names if you don't.
okay, my understanding is that 2 of our peer districts do require both. They take the semester exam and the EOC, and they both count. And that 2 of our peer districts that we've checked with, it's one or the other. If you've got an EOC, there's no semester exam. But that they do count the EOC consistently, no matter when it comes in. And I think that's one piece. But I know at least one of the districts, very high-performing district, counts both every time. When the EOC comes in, even if it comes in after the 5 days, they count the EOC, and they also then have a semester exam that they spend the last, 4 to 5 weeks preparing for. Those seem to be the 2 models. There's lots of variation over exemptions and the who, what, when, where of that. But I think we've got a good model for that.
Can you explain how the EOC affects the teacher's evaluation? Or their teacher?
Yes,
process?
it is, it counts as a, boy, I'd have to pull that up too. It counts as a percentage of their final evaluation. Is it 15? On them both. Thank you, Ms. Martin. You want to just come take my seat? Ms. Martin said growth is 35 and achievement is 25. So the growth is the TVOS, and then the achievement is basically the percentage of proficient and advanced that they get on the
And that one was
on the test.
25?
That one was 25.
25% of the teacher's evaluation is basically their, I know TVOS is their growth, but, and I know that's a little different calculation.
Yeah, it
But
is.
essentially it's the achievement of the students, or the EOC percentage proficient and advanced.
The
So the-
teachers, I feel like I speak to the teachers. The teachers would like to be able to say to the students, this is going to count towards your grade.
Right. Because it counts towards theirs.
It counts towards theirs.
So,
It also counts towards our
It counts
school and
towards-
school system accountability. And when those scores come out, and the much ballyhooed achievement scores that we look at sometimes, that's,
I like the alignment of interest for sure.
yeah, well put.
yes, go ahead.
The way you worded the 32% and again, gives me cause for pause. I would like for us to consider something that maybe still allows for both to count, but us setting a max for both together. Maybe, and again, I'm just spitballing, thinking out loud, which is dangerous. If there's an EOC, it's gotta be 15%. Maybe the EOC and the teacher created combined go to a maximum of 20 or 25%. And if we don't get an EOC, then the teacher created counts for the total amount. Or we just count an EOC whenever it comes in. I'd like to see something that contemplates both of those so that there is still a student accountability, it supports to align to the teacher, at the same time allows some flexibility to consider both.
You also find out, and I know teachers are gone for the summer, but can y'all discuss, If the EOC were to count, is there, towards whether it came in 5 days or 4 days, or came in the last day, or even, the day after school let out, or whatever, would y'all be able to go back and review whether there's still favorability to have teacher-created semester exams? I know that that's part of the reason of the drive for this, is that, the teachers felt like there needed to be some accountability with the students on exams, and the state doesn't get hasn't traditionally gotten it in time, so that the 5 days. So is there still the really strong opinion about having teacher-created exams if the EOC were to count regardless of when it came in?
I'm looking at Ms. Martin again. I think we could get some feedback in the short term. What I'm hearing kind of yelling here is a consensus that that the board would be comfortable in altering the current policy that says if you don't get it in 5, basically we're going to count the least that we can, which means that if it doesn't come in 5 days, we're not going to count it, and setting up a more consistent application of EOC scores, and that B, the board more comfortable with the idea of an exam plus EOC combination if there was a kind of minimum damage in terms of potential impact more than damage, of the combination of those tests on the final grade. And so that if we could possibly find a sweet spot that worked technically, and that is part of it, we do need to find something that works technically, because we throw all these things into these computers, and those computers report to states, and it is high stakes because it impacts students' class ranks and their GPAs and all these things, and particularly the less time we get with those scores, the more important it is that we have a clear process of which buckets do we put these scores in. But if I could work with Ms. Martin and Ms. Decker and maybe come back with, we can find that sweet spot, does that seem to be, in addition to finding out what the, in addition to finding out if making the EOCs a more consistent, reliable part of the calculation changes all for the semester exams. Is that what I'm
Yes.
hearing? Okay, all right. We shall do those things.
All right. Any more discussion? All right, next item.
Make a note here.
Oh,
Might
and-
wanna-
I do have one if we can for a moment.
Yes, sir.
Page 6, row 30, there's a font inconsistency. I know you can just fix that between now and next week.
6 row 30.
Yep. Sometimes you roll them into Arial.
Oh, I see that, yeah. Anything else, we're gonna fix that part. We may not figure the rest of it out, but we'll get that part. Okay. All right, get back to my agenda. The next item is, if I can, since it's a work session, can we take these two kind of together in terms of explanation, Ms. Harrison?
The vacation, the personal and
Personal and professional leave
Yes.
and vacations and holidays. Okay, these are two related items that Ms. Millspaw in her Human Resources role and I have discussed. Much of our personal and professional leave and vacations and holidays policies were holdovers from Shelby County Schools, and in terms of the calculations themselves, there are some restrictions on what it takes for employees to earn vacation days and what they can do with vacation and personal and professional leave. And essentially, we are proposing some changes that we feel like would better incentivize being hired by Lakeland School System and staying with Lakeland School System, and would also better recognize the extremely hard work that our employees do. And we feel like this is something we can do at low cost to the school system, and anytime we can do something that may possibly improves morale, recognizes and rewards our employees, and is at a low cost as a bonus, we want to try to do that. So one thing that we're adding, if we start with the personal and professional leave, we're saying that personal and professional leave remaining unused at the end of the year can be credited to sick leave with a maximum of 3 days. We've had kind of a use it or lose it that almost seemed arbitrary. I guess, and we wanted to fix that part of that policy. And clarified it to certified employees who are on the maximum step of the LSS salary schedule, not just being specific to teachers, because we have some certified employees that don't have as many steps, but do get maxed out on the salary schedule. So it recognizes that. And then on the vacations and holidays, we have a number of changes here. It notes the third annual day, the unused days that can be carried over. And we basically take off that first, it just feels like that first category that we had, it was really just not enough to reasonably provide somebody with adequate vacation for a year, the 0.83 days per month. So we move that to the 1 to 3 years is 1 day per month, and then 3 to 10 is 1.25 days. And then the 5 years or more, you get 1.67 for a maximum of 20 days per year, and felt like that felt good and felt right in terms of Ms. Millspa's and I's calculation of the kind of vacation that could be earned.
I'd like to add something.
Go ahead.
Or just say something. The first policy I think is great. In this competitive job environment, we need to be doing everything we can to as attractive as possible as far as employment goes. On the second one, and this is the vacation and holidays, page, I believe it's 2, it goes on line 3, it says 3 years but less than 10 years, and then on line 6 it says 5 years or more. Am I reading that wrong? Should that be 10 years or more? Five years?
That's right. Yeah, it meant to be less than 5.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yes.
okay.
Thank you for catching that.
No worries.
That's correct.
Gotcha, I'm good.
Okay, great.
And then one question, does this create a fiscal implication by increasing the number of days carried forward? Someone terminates, we're potentially, I mean, they retire, they separate from us. That potentially increases the liability to pay out vacation days, right?
Well,
Not
there-
significantly.
So if you'll look at line 3, and Ms. Millspaw, check me on this, we had
Which policy?
I'm so sorry, the second one, vacations and holidays. I think that's.
On
is
page
that-
1?
Let me start over. Okay, you're right, thank you.
Trying to get where you are.
Yep. Not even line 3, it is well, what page is this? Page 2. Line number 3. With me? The end of that says all eligible employees may accrue up to a maximum of 25 vacation days. So in other words, the example I used with somebody else earlier, you probably understand that, but if you've already got 25 days in March, you don't use any vacation days, and then in April you earn another 1.67 days, you've still just got 25 vacation days. So now you could, to your point, you could accrue it faster.
Right.
But the max liability doesn't change.
Great. And I was just gonna say, even though I knew it might, but now seeing that max, we might have people get there quicker. I think it's a worthwhile investment.
I think so too.
Didn't have concerns. I just want to make sure we were transparent that we might increase the liability for people who don't hit the 25 days. Again, I think it's a recruiting tool.
Yeah.
More discussion? I do have a question. I know we struggle sometimes with finding substitute teachers. Is there any concern that getting more days faster, like to be able to take off more days, like let's say at year 3 instead of year 5 or whatever, is there any concern being able to support this from a substitute teacher standpoint?
Aren't these 12-month
That is-
employees?
Yes, that is only for 12-month
Okay.
employees, so that wouldn't impact, the only thing that would impact the certified teachers is the additional
The sick leave
personal
one?
day.
Okay.
Yeah,
Or the
the-
additional
the-
personal day?
the additional personal day.
Okay. More discussion? With
We-
the one, go ahead.
I was gonna suggest,
Yeah, with the one minor correction with aligning the 5 and 10, fixing that, is there any objection to placing these two on the consent agenda?
Fine with that.
Hearing no objection, these items will be placed on the consent agenda next week. Next item.
Next item is policy 6.313, discipline procedures. All right, have two things. One was a carryover from last month, and I feel like and hope that we have a good recommendation that I think with all the board's feedback, it makes this a better policy. I had brought a proposal that a refusal to be searched or participate in a search would automatically be a 45-day suspension. I know there was some hesitation to do that. And so what we've done is put that behavior under level 4. So refusal to be searched or participate in a search, behaving uncooperatively during a search becomes a level 4 misbehavior. And the disciplinary options are expulsion, and expulsion is basically more than 10 days. So what the board is committing to, that would be a more than 10-day suspension, but would allow for quite a bit of additional flexibility between that 10 and 45-day point, whereas we said if there are some of the circumstances or possibilities that board members brought up. So we think that sits comfortably there. And we also wanted to clarify that this was something that has come up. It is part of Tennessee Code Annotated, but wanted to include off-campus criminal behavior that results in the student being legally charged with an offense that would be classified as a felony if the student was charged as an adult. So that would be listed out under our level 4 misbehaviors as well.
So that last part about the off-campus criminal behavior, you said that's Tennessee annotated code, so that's state law?
Yes.
About that? They're not, how do we end up getting the information if they're not actually charged as an adult? Because it's,
We have a relationship with juvenile court, and we wind up, we have access to that.
okay, they'd be able to say, well, you know, if they were charged as an adult, this would be a felony class, but instead it's this, so then we
Yes.
know.
For the most part. Now, this can be complicated as we found, but we wanted to at least have it there because we do know that is a situation in which you're allowed to. Now, there may be extenuating circumstances, as Mr. Plumley knows, and there may be other pieces of information that come up, and sometimes the charges get dropped and it becomes more complicated. But it does seem pretty clear that if you are charged with an offense that would be classified as a felony off campus, then you can suspend for that.
And does that, I noticed there's a cross-reference, the cross-reference listed for the TCA for the off-campus criminal behavior. Have it added if
I
it's
think
not.
we can add that one. Ms. Millspy can give you that TCA to add for the second one, the off-campus criminal behavior.
For discussion? Hearing none, any objection to placing this item on the consent agenda? And this item will go on the consent agenda. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on approval of curriculum materials. Right?
Go ahead.
So as part of our Innovative Schools Model grant, we have purchased a lot of equipment to set up a clean room and a number of other exciting course, basically enhancements for a new course that we're offering, which is biotech. And we wanted to get the board's approval of the curriculum for biotechnology, a laboratory skills course. This would be for biostem, I'm sorry, I said biotech, biostem 1, 2, and 3.
Any discussion on this item? None. Any objection to this item going on the consent agenda? Hearing none, this item will be placed on the consent agenda next week. Next item.
All right, next item, discussion action on updates to LSS Facilities Use Agreement. And essentially, at the board's request, I've brought back 2 versions of our current facilities use agreement. One is version 1 has 3 group categories, and those group categories are, well, let me say this. There seems to be a consensus that we want certainly the school, but also groups directly associated with the school, namely, in most cases, booster clubs and other school support organizations, to be able to utilize campus facilities for purposes that are appropriate to supporting the schools. We also seem to have a consensus that we want the city to be able to continue to utilize facilities if they are available to support city activities. The question seems to be at this point, do we want to also allow non-school or city organizations that are not-for-profit groups to rent the facilities? So we have one version that has that column 3, where a group would have to come in, they'd have to make the request, they would have to demonstrate that they have the insurance, that they have the release from liability, that they have the paperwork, that they have the staff. We would have to tally up the charges, make sure that we have staff that can be available in terms of plant management, and then whether or not that facility is available. I said at last month's meeting, at this point, based on the use of our facilities, which is very, very heavy, the increasing demand on facilities, my recommendation would be to approve the version 2 with the 2 group categories, which pretty much means our folks, our school support organizations, those that are directly supporting the school formally can use it. You have Lakeland groups, mainly covered by the MOU, but also if there's a one-off that they needed to have a town hall meeting or something, that we would continue to oblige those, and that other groups that inquired would just be told at this time, we're not renting our facilities to outside groups. That is, it's my recommendation, but I knew it would be good for the board to see it in black and white and what that looks like.
Support that.
I support that as well. I do have a question on that one. On
Okay.
page 5, on item B, down close to the bottom, it says use of facilities by churches and synagogues. Churches and synagogues may rent school facilities for worse. Is that just like statement, or that's not saying we would allow it, that's just statement saying that they can? I was trying to understand how that portion fit into this group 1, group 2 discussion.
I can't see any reason why it would need to be included if we do the group 1 and group 2. That was an oversight.
Okay.
And I was the one that asked for group 3 to be left in there. I still like the idea of leaving it in there, knowing that I don't believe we've done that with any groups yet. Is that what we talked about?
We've done it, we've had one rental.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not in there, we can't without board action. And so knowing that we've done it once in 7 years, I hate to close that off to those limited groups that would fit, especially when we look at our illustrative examples of scouting groups, church groups. If we limit it to 2, then we don't have the option. Administration could still say no if there were 3. We don't have the option to say yes. So I like the option of being able to say yes on a very limited basis. But at the same time, I would advocate to leave all 3 groups in there, but also know that we're a voting body and that's my one voice.
May I?
Go ahead. Yes,
My
sure, go.
apology. So if I understand what you're saying is leave, and this is in the version 2, you would leave section B in, is that correct?
I would advocate for the 3 group category option that the agenda.
Version 1. Yep.
You're, okay.
And then that section B would still then need to stay in to allow that.
On version 1.
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
But version 2, if we go that route, move that B portion.
Correct.
Got it.
Again, I would defer to Dr. Horrell, but I think so, yes.
I guess this item we will place on the regular agenda. Is there any
Sounds like it.
more discussion?
So this last time, I just think, I like the idea of being able, people can use it when, when they meet their, groups could use it when they meet the criteria. However, I feel like our staff already works so hard, and someone ends up, even if they're paid extra, they still have to come in on an off time, and that just leads to, in my opinion, lower morale when you're told, hey, you're getting paid extra, but you gotta, it's not negotiable. Somebody's got to cover this event or supervise this group using it, and it does feel like with us being unique with being a combined school and not even having all the grades, I think we've all been very surprised at how busy that the buildings are, and that some of the teams are already like, but I want it then, and I want it then. So to add another entity to trying to, and we're still trying to, I can't even imagine the calendars on all the teams, and we don't even have all of the what we're gonna have through 12th grade yet. So, I'm supporting, version 2, but I have no issue with it, not being on the consent agenda.
And we'll go on the regular agenda. Got it.
Next item is discussion action on FY 22-23 budget amendments.
Go ahead, I'm there now.
All right,
Is there anything that we need to, is this basic? No, I don't know if there's anything you need to present on this, or,
I will note that this, so the agenda says 22-23. This is technically 23-24.
23-24.
And, yes, this was, we basically just caught an error that we had posted for the high school, the second high school guidance position. And my intent at least was that it also be an 11-month position like the existing high school position, and we had it budgeted as a 10.5. Ms. Rosales was able to find the additional funds to make it an 11-month position, so we're requesting that position be updated.
section to this item going on the consent agenda?
No, Judge.
Hearing none, this item will go on the consent agenda. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on 22-23 charge-offs of cafeteria accounts. This is basically, we get to a point, our staff does a great job of trying to track down folks that have delinquent cafeteria accounts, and sometimes clock just runs out. They move on, they move away, they move to another school, and the cafeteria staff says, I think we've done all we can do. So it's required that those be brought before the board, so the board's aware that basically pardon the expression, the system would eat the balance.
This is, we haven't had this.
You should laugh at that. Don't encourage that.
We haven't had this because for a period of time, then there were free lunches.
They were free, that's right,
Yeah,
that's right.
we
So it's
haven't
been a
had-
while, yeah.
Yes, okay,
So several on this board probably have not
yeah.
had that.
Just a point of curiosity more than anything, what's the aging on these? I mean, I know this is through this year, but are these balances like 6 months, 12 months? Obviously not 12 months, but.
I can get you kind of the max. I mean, I think some of them are years in some cases.
Any objection to placing this item on the consent agenda? Hearing none, this item will be placed on the consent agenda. Next item.
Okay, let me make a note. Age of the cafeteria accounts. Okay, the next item is discussion action on the FY 23-24 consolidated funding application. This is basically where the board acknowledges that we have a number of consolidated grants that were part of the budget process and have been passed. I've always noted it's kind of a convoluted thing because we get the allocations and then we budget them and then the board approves the budget and then it has to be submitted back to the state that the board approves the actual consolidated grants budget itself. So it's not new information really, but it does require a board vote with the date that the board was approved it.
None. Any objection to placing this item on the consent agenda? Hearing none, this item will be placed on the consent agenda. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on approval of the superintendent's surety bond. This is another annual requirement, and this was sent to board members, and Ms. Rosales noted that because we're not dealing with nearly as much federal money in this coming year as we have been for the last several years, then the surety bond amount is being reduced from $1,198,882 to $549,348. If the board approves and wanted to put this on the consent agenda, Ms. Millspa, I think we could just go ahead and add that amount to the agenda item and move it to consent, just so it's in the record clearly.
Agenda will be on the consent agenda next week with a dollar amount spelled out. Next item.
Okay, next item is finalize the superintendent's evaluation.
Eric, is this you?
Typically, Eric.
My name's not on it, but I'm happy to do it. That time of year.
Is your mic on? Hit the red button on
All right. Yeah, every year the board evaluates the superintendent, and I don't know if it always happens in June or
Oh,
it's
we've
just in
changed that.
June this year. But this happens based on Lakeland school policy. And Dr. Horrell and the board get together and they work on the evaluation form, and the board knows how this works, but I guess for the benefit of the public, I'll just briefly explain it. There are 6 objectives that are graded on a 6-point scale. And for each objective, there's several, I guess I'll call them sub-objectives. And all the board members evaluate Dr. Horrell anonymously, and then the results are sent to Ms. Millspa, and then she does all the math, and then they come to me, and then I report them to the board at this meeting. Once again, Dr. Horrell got a very strong, favorable review. Like I said, it's a 6-point scale, 6 being the highest, and the way the rating scale is defined, 5 is exceeds expectations, and 6 is greatly exceeds expectations. And for the first objective, which is school culture and instructional program, Dr. Horrell received a 5.69. The next one is management and operations, and Dr. Horrell received a 5.7. Next is collaboration with families and community. Dr. Horrell received a 5.83. The fourth objective is integrity, fairness, and ethics, a perfect 6.0. Objective 5 is superintendent and board relationship, 5.69. And the final one is student outcomes and achievement, which is 5.68. Then everything is tied together at the end with a grade of 5.76. So between greatly exceeds expectations and exceeds expectations, but a good bit closer to greatly exceeds expectations. That's the broad overview of the 2023 superintendent evaluation. If there are any questions.
Like I want to hold up a diving thing for the sinks especially.
Thank you so much for putting that together and working on that. Any discussion? You did a great job.
Thanks,
Great.
Jessica.
You did a great job. I will say, I will speak a little bit to the evaluation just to speak to it. I do appreciate, I think it speaks, I think every year, I'm pretty sure every year on your integrity, fairness, and ethics has always been a 6.0. I can't remember a year that it hasn't since you started with Lakeland School System. I think that speaks highly of the high standards that you have for our school system, expectations and high standards you have for this board of yourself, and all that to say is I greatly appreciate you as our superintendent and your approach to all things that you do. It's not just one, it's all things in every area. So I think that this review speaks volumes to the things that you continue to display year after year. I haven't seen any change as far as any of that. So I do thank you, and I appreciate your continued service to our school system. Do we have to have that on, or we don't
No,
have to?
you don't
Okay.
have to, it does not have to be
Board
part of the
action
board.
to be taken.
Right,
All right, so that actually does not have to go on our consent
correct.
agenda.
Yeah, that would be the end.
All right. Is there, well, that's the last item on our agenda. Is there anything anybody else would bring up, discuss, announcements?
I appreciate the board members doing the evaluation and for your feedback. I certainly always take it to heart and take it very seriously. Every year, work to continue to get better, so thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.